we might have some more changes coming to how we consider NIL. Now, what you may have heard by now is that we've had Nick Saban make the trip up to a roundtable discussion around NIL in college athletics. This was hosted mainly by Senator Cruz of Texas. Politics aside, he was the one that did hosted it. A few other people were involved, but a lot of people were fixating on the comments that were actually made by Nick Saban. And one of the reasons he spoke very adamantly, very publicly about why he ended up walking away from college football, why he ended up retiring before, he gets to that Joe Paterno type state where for Joe Paterno, it was very clear and it was very obvious that Joe Paterno's best days were behind him. Now, Nick Saban's best days could also have been behind him as well. But what we do also foresee for ourselves is could we also think that Nick Saban might have had more in the tank now? I mean, Nick Saban could have certainly won himself another national championship. He was in a position to do so yet again with his Alabama team, an Alabama team that had some flaws, and yet they still found a way to be in that Final Four to the detriment, of course, of what we had with Florida State. But I'm not here to talk about that Alabama Florida State argument. I'm here to talk about Nick Saban and his comments of NIL. Well, the big reason why he stepped away the um from the thing of college football, sorry, I was losing my train of thought because of all the action happening around my house, is that it became a thing where at first, like Alabama was always about trying to develop people for the NFL and what Alabama can ultimately do for you. And it, made a positive impact on many college football players. Nick Saban, had more draft picks in the NFL than losses during his tenure at Alabama. I mean, that's something to think about. Not a lot of coaches can say that. More NFL draft picks than losses. And it was not a short tenure either. So that was what Alabama was always about in the eyes of Nick Saban. Now, nowadays, whenever you have these exit meetings on when you're talking to your roster, going into next season, it's started to turn into, well, how much will you pay me? And also, how much playing time will you be able to give me? It's no longer about what Alabama could do for you. It's more about what can Alabama do for me time thing. It's not a more of a we thing, it's more of an I thing. And I don't blame these kids for having that type of mentality at all. I mean, these kids are just trying to make as much money as possible because the vast majority of college football players, they are not going to be able to make it to the NFL. So they're trying to maximize their revenue and maybe use that revenue from college football to better not only better themselves but also better their families. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nick Saban has even gone to record in saying that he doesn't have an issue with the players being paid. What he does have an issue with is how these players are being paid right now, because it has turned into a Wild West type atmosphere in college football with all the NIL collectives running around. And I think, we lost sight of what NIL should be about, right? Because, okay, it shouldn't be boosters being able to directly put money into a collective and then Nick Saban deciding, okay, we're going to give $50,000 for this right tackle. Maybe we're going to give $200,000 for this quarterback. That's not how it's supposed to work at all. How it's supposed to be is that you get yourself on campus, you become a college football player, and then if someone out locally or nationally reaches out to you individually and you want to do something, outside of the team, that's all fine and well. And I don't have an issue with that. But right now, NIL is just an absolute mess. Now, there is about a 50-50 chance that we could see a bill being passed in Congress for NIL purposes, and there is support on both sides of the aisle. There is support by both Republicans and Democrats to actually get that kind of bill pushed out. But whether we see something this year, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. If it doesn't happen in the next couple of months, I don't imagine anything happening until we get into next year, because we are in an election year. Just That's just the reality of the situation. So I absolutely agree with Nick Saban. I agree that players should be paid. They should be paid for their name, image, and likeness, because it's the very players on the field that are generating revenue for these universities, for these athletic departments. But we need to regulate it better. We need to find a way to get it to where it's not boosters directly paying players in order to go to their school. It should be you choose to go to a school for other reasons. And then if NILs come up to the individual afterwards, when maybe after they prove themselves on the field, then, maybe like a Buick or a Nissan company can come out, reach out, and, ask for a partnership and, pay him separately than maybe, his athletic or academic scholarships that he or she may receive. So hopefully the NIL stuff gets cleaned up. I think NIL can be a great leveler of the playing field. I think we've already seen this in college basketball. It's going to take longer for that to do in college football because there is more players involved in college football than there is in college basketball. But I do think eventually we can get to a point to where we could see it being this leveler of the playing field. We could see more parity, because I know many of you would not mind seeing more parity in college football, but we need to clean up the NIL stuff. We absolutely need to do that, and we need to do that as soon as possible in order to create less of a Wild West type environment in our sport.